My name is Lou Anderson. I'm 30 years old. And this is the story of how my own family replaced me on a trip I paid for, only to beg for my help from across the ocean. It was 6 a.m. on a gray Seattle morning when I pulled into the driveway of the white-paneled house my parents had lived in for over 2 decades. I could still smell the coffee I rushed to brew before leaving my apartment. This day had been 2 years in the making. 2 years of budgeting, planning, saving, of skipping brunches, postponing dentist appointments, saying maybe next time to every spontaneous trip just to make this one dream vacation a reality. A European adventure for me, my mother, and my father. I had envisioned it down to the detail: sunset dinners along the Seine, private food tours in Florence, and that long-awaited gondola ride in Venice. When the front door creaked open, I smiled automatically. But it faltered the moment I saw what was behind it. My mom stepped out with her usual red suitcase, frayed at the seams from years of family road trips. Behind her, rolling a brand-new rose-gold hard-shell suitcase with designer luggage tags, was April, my younger sister. My heart dropped, like someone had cut the strings holding it up. I didn't even have to ask, but I did anyway. "What's going on?" My voice cracked, even though I tried to keep it steady. "Why does April have luggage?" Mom offered that smile she always used when trying to convince me that I was being dramatic. "Oh, honey, I forgot to tell you. We decided April should go instead. She's been under a lot of stress lately. You know, with the whole job thing, she really needs this break." I stood there frozen. "Mom," I said, trying not to shout. "I planned this trip. I paid for it. Everything, the flights, the hotels, the reservations, are all under my name." She waved a dismissive hand, like I was bothering her with logistics. "We know, and we're very grateful. But you work too much. You can always take another trip later. April really needs this one now." I looked over at April. Not a shred of guilt on her face. Instead, she smiled like she'd just won something. "Thanks, sis. You're the best big sister ever." Dad stepped outside at that moment. For a split second, I held on to hope. Maybe he'd speak up. Maybe he'd say it wasn't right. But he didn't even look me in the eye. He just handed me his suitcase like I was the chauffeur. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout. But I didn't. I swallowed the anger like I had so many times before, when April broke my camera and blamed me, when she crashed my car and got comforted while I paid for the repairs, when I got overlooked for scholarships so she could have a chance. Always April. Always her first. Without a word, I loaded the bags into my SUV, the same one I was still making monthly payments on. April slid into the back seat, legs crossed, blasting pop music from her phone. "Hope it's not too hot in Italy," she said without a trace of irony. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. No one asked if I was okay. Not a single person said, "Sorry, Lou." Not even a glance of acknowledgement that I had been replaced. My throat burned with the kind of pain that's too old to be fresh but too deep to be ignored. We drove in silence, or rather, I did. April and Mom were busy talking about outfits and photo ops, as if I were invisible. They chatted about April's pre-ordered dress for Milan, the shoes she'd wear in Paris. Meanwhile, I clenched the wheel tighter with every mile toward the airport. When we arrived at SeaTac, I parked, turned off the engine, and watched them unbuckle with cheerful chatter. Dad stepped out and started unloading bags like this was just any other day. Mom leaned toward me and put her hand on my shoulder. "Thank you for understanding, Lou. This is very mature of you." I gave her a smile so tight it could have cracked glass. "Sure," I whispered. April looked over her sunglasses and said, "Don't forget to water Mom's plants." I watched them walk into the terminal, suitcases in tow, my SUV slowly emptying. And for the first time in my life, I didn't cry from being left behind. I drove home, walked straight into my kitchen, and opened my laptop. Hotel, cancelled. Private tour in Florence, cancelled. Versailles tickets, cancelled. Santorini cruise, cancelled. Only one reservation remained, round-trip business class tickets for 3. I cancelled the return flight. Let them figure that part out. My phone buzzed non-stop that night. Mom, Ella, the hotel says we're not in the system. Call me. April, what the heck, Lou? I'm standing at the front desk and they're saying we're not booked. Dad, please call your mom. We're having problems. I didn't respond. I brewed peppermint tea and sat out on the porch. The air was cool, the silence welcome. I had no more obligations tonight. I slept like a rock, no guilt, no anxious dreams. The next morning, I arranged flowers in the kitchen and let the phone vibrate on the counter. A few minutes later, it rang again, FaceTime this time. April. I didn't answer. She could see what life was like without me, just for once. When Mom finally called later that day, her voice was barely controlled. Lou, this isn't funny. The hotel turned us away. There's no room. The tours are cancelled. We had to walk a mile to find another place. No AC. No decent food. Shared bathrooms. It's a nightmare. I took a slow sip of coffee. I thought April needed a relaxing vacation. Don't get smart with me, she snapped. Just call and fix it. You're the one who booked it, aren't you? I paused. If you chose April instead of me, maybe she should take responsibility instead of me too. Her voice lowered. Are you trying to punish us? No, I said, smiling. I'm just protecting what I created. She went silent. In the background, I heard April bark, Mom, hang up. She's not going to help. She's been selfish from the start. I let out a low chuckle. Selfish is what happens when you finally stop letting people take everything and leave you empty. And I hung up. That night, I poured a glass of red wine, sat in my living room surrounded by peace, and smiled, not out of pettiness, but out of release. They had taken me for granted for years. This time, I let them feel what life was like without me. And this was only the beginning. The morning after I cut them off, I woke up to a familiar sound I hadn't heard in years, silence. Not just the absence of noise, but the absence of pressure. Of being needed without gratitude. Of being dragged into someone else's crisis. My name is Lou Anderson, and for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel responsible for anyone but myself. I brewed a fresh espresso and opened my laptop again, not out of guilt or duty, but out of curiosity. I reread the itinerary I had so carefully curated. 5 cities. 11 days. Dozens of personalized touches. I'd even planned little surprises, a spa day in Nice, a candlelit dinner cruise in Paris, a hidden rooftop cafe in Florence. And now, none of it was happening, for them. For me? That was still to be decided. By noon, my phone had rung 9 times. I didn't answer any of them. Not April's dramatic texts, not my dad's half-hearted voicemails, and certainly not my mother's passive-aggressive messages that toggled between guilt trips and demands. I went grocery shopping in peace. Bought fresh herbs. Cooked a meal slowly, without rushing. I played jazz while chopping vegetables. Then I sat on my balcony and read a book. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was simply reclaiming space. But they were spiraling. At 3:37 p.m., I received a new voice message from my father. Lou. It's Dad. Your mom hasn't slept. April's being, well, herself. We've tried booking new hotels, but the ones we can afford are booked solid or awful. She's crying, Lou. Please. Help us fix this. I didn't respond. Because this wasn't a tech issue or a missed email. It wasn't about reservations or transportation. This was the consequence of choices they made. Replacing me wasn't a scheduling error, it was a statement. And now, they could live with the echo of that statement. The next day, as I sat at my dining table trimming a bouquet, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a FaceTime request from April. I almost declined. But I didn't. I answered and stared at her face, a little too shiny with sweat, eyebrows furrowed with frustration. "Are you seriously doing this?" she snapped without greeting. "Do you know what kind of situation you've put us in?" "I didn't put you in anything," I said calmly. "You walked into it, rolled your suitcase right into it, actually. You're being vindictive. Childish. You're sabotaging your own family." "No," I said, placing the scissors down gently. "I'm finally respecting myself. There's a difference." She blinked, clearly caught off guard by how calm I was. I continued. "This trip was supposed to be about bonding. About gratitude. About finally doing something together. And you hijacked it." "I didn't hijack anything. Mom and Dad chose?" "Exactly," I interrupted. "They chose. Again. As always. And now they can live with that choice." She hung up. That night, I received a message from Mom. "Lou, this is beyond reason now." We were turned away from another hotel. I cried on the sidewalk in Paris. "Your father was humiliated. Is that what you wanted?" "No. I never wanted that. What I wanted was for someone to finally say, 'Lou, we're sorry. We were wrong.' But even now, they couldn't say it. Instead, they wanted me to clean up the mess. Like always." I didn't answer. The next morning, I received an email. Subject line: "Congratulations, $1M milestone surpassed." It was from the finance department at my firm. The project I had led for nearly 18 months, the Santa Fe account, had just hit 7 figures in revenue. A sizable bonus was being wired to my account. I stared at the screen for a moment, and then I smiled. The irony wasn't lost on me. That money I had once eagerly set aside for a family trip, was now mine to do with as I pleased. I no longer needed anyone's validation. I had built something real. Tangible. And no one could take it from me. That evening, the phone rang again. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, and this time, something in my gut told me to pick up. It was Dad. "Lou," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "I just wanted to say. I didn't think it would go this far." I stepped out onto my porch, phone in hand, and let the cool air settle over my skin. "What did you think would happen when you handed me your suitcase and looked away?" I asked softly. There was a pause. Then a sigh. "I felt guilty," he admitted. "But your mom said you'd understand. That you'd forgive us, like you always do." I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see me. "I did mind, Dad," I said. "But I'm used to being pushed aside." His voice cracked. "We didn't mean for it to hurt like this." "But it did," I replied. "And now, I'm doing something I've never done before. I'm letting it be your problem, not mine." He didn't speak for a while. Just the sound of his breathing, and somewhere in the distance, the honk of a Paris taxi. I didn't blame him. Not entirely. But I wasn't going to save him either. Not this time. That night, I made lasagna and ate alone, but for the first time, it didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. I wasn't mourning the family I never had. I was stepping out of their shadow. And that silence? It wasn't cold anymore. It was mine. The next few days passed in quiet clarity. I was still Lou Anderson, daughter, sister, planner, provider, but I had shed the invisible uniform I'd worn for years, the peacemaker, the fixer, the one who always took the high road even when the pavement tore my feet to shreds. It's strange, the first time you realize that peace isn't something given. It's something taken, intentionally, firmly, and sometimes with a kind of brutal mercy. The night after my conversation with Dad, I was laying out a new puzzle on my dining room table, soft jazz humming in the background, when my phone vibrated again. Caller ID, Mom. I stared at the screen. I could almost picture her, pacing in a poorly lit room, frustration layered over fatigue. Her pride injured, but not enough to truly reflect. The kind of discomfort that comes from consequences, not yet growth. I picked up. Lou, she began, skipping pleasantries. Her voice was worn, thinner than I'd ever heard it. We need to talk. I'm listening, I said. I don't understand how you could do this, she said. Family is family. No matter what happens, you don't treat family this way. I closed my eyes and took a long breath. Then opened them, stared out at the small lavender plant blooming on my windowsill. Did you cry, I asked, when you cut me out of the trip I planned and paid for? Silence. Just breathing on the other end. I continued. I didn't do this out of spite. I did it because for the first time in my life, I chose to protect my own boundary. You made a choice, Mom. You chose April. You always do. I simply removed the reward that came with betraying me. Her voice wavered. We didn't mean it like that. You work so much. We thought. No, I cut in gently. You didn't think at all. In the background, I heard the faint creak of a chair, then April's voice, sharp as ever, she's being ridiculous. Just drop the act, Lou. What are you trying to prove? I ignored her. I'm not proving anything, I said. I'm freeing myself. And I ended the call. The next day was Sunday. I woke early, brewed coffee, and went on a walk through the neighborhood. The air was crisp, heavy with the scent of wet earth from the night's rain. I walked past the old bookstore, the cafe where I used to study, and then looped around the park. When I got home, I found myself doing something unexpected. I reopened the folder I had used to plan the Eurotrip. The confirmation emails were gone, yes. But the spreadsheet, the one with my travel budgets, notes, dream restaurants, and wish lists, remained. I stared at it for a long while, then clicked open a new tab. And I began planning again. But this time, it wasn't for anyone else. No April. No Mom. No Dad. Just me. Portugal. A place I'd always dreamed of but had set aside for what felt more family-friendly. Lisbon, specifically. Cobblestone streets, tiled walls, pastel buildings that looked like something out of a dream. And this time, no matching luggage. No coordinating hotel check-ins. No sister taking over every moment. Just quiet. Intention. Autonomy. 2 days later, I booked it. Round-trip ticket. Boutique hotel. No return plans beyond rest. A week passed. The calls from my family dwindled. April stopped texting. Mom went radio silent. And Dad left one voicemail I never listened to. I focused on me reading, walking, journaling. I bought a new journal just for the trip. I flew out on a Thursday. When the plane landed in Lisbon, the sunlight poured through the window like honey. I stepped off the aircraft with nothing more than a carry-on and a deep breath. No itinerary. Just 3 goals. Walk. Observe. Breathe. That first day, I strolled aimlessly through the Alfama district, letting the guitar music from a nearby corner drift through my soul. I didn't rush. I didn't check my phone. I didn't worry if someone else was bored or hungry or annoyed. At a small riverside cafe, I ordered bacalhau au bras, something I couldn't pronounce but adored anyway, and ate alone while watching sailboats bob gently on the water. No one interrupted me to talk about April's job or her latest crisis. I listened to myself. To my breath. To my joy. That night, I sat on the hotel's rooftop terrace. The sun melted into the horizon, turning the buildings to gold. I opened my journal and wrote one sentence. I have stopped putting out fires I didn't start. The next morning, I took a train to Sintra. I hiked up to the vibrant red and yellow towers of Pena Palace. Tourists moved around me like waves, but I felt untouchable. Light. Free. That's when I met Helena. She was perched on a bench with a film camera hanging from her neck, flipping through a well-worn travel journal. She looked up and smiled at me like we'd known each other forever. "First time in Portugal?" she asked. I nodded. "First time traveling alone." She chuckled. "Best way to learn who you really are." We talked for over an hour, about books, about disappointment, about the strange beauty of solitude. Helena was 62, retired from teaching, traveling 3 times a year by herself. "I used to think I was born to take care of others," she said as we sipped espresso. "Until I realized no one was taking care of me." That sentence hit me harder than any voicemail ever could. When I returned to my hotel that night, I replayed her words again and again. And I wrote in my journal. I am not selfish for walking away from people who only love me when I'm useful. I am not cruel for choosing peace over performance. I am not less because I am finally choosing more, for me. The rest of the trip blurred in the most beautiful way, sun-drenched alleyways, warm pastries, new scents and sounds that had nothing to do with the past. I existed without obligation. And when I returned to Seattle, I didn't bring souvenirs for anyone. Only unfinished journal pages, 3 stones from the beach in Cascais, and a new understanding of myself. The morning after I got home, I checked my voicemail. There were 2 messages from my mom. One cautious. One pleading. But I didn't listen to either. Not yet. First, I took a shower, made tea, and sat by the window, watching the golden light bathe the neighboring rooftops. I didn't know what would come next. But for once, I wasn't afraid of it. It was the quiet that struck me most. Not the kind you fill with background noise, but the kind that feels earned, like the stillness after a storm has passed. And I, Lou Anderson, was finally standing in the clear. A week had passed since I returned from Portugal. I hadn't spoken to my family since Lisbon. The voicemails sat untouched in my inbox like unopened bills, thick with obligation, thin on sincerity. I knew they were apologies, or at least attempts to sound like them. But I had learned something crucial while away. I wasn't obligated to open every door just because someone knocked. Still, I wasn't bitter. I wasn't plotting revenge or waiting for them to hurt the way I had. That phase had passed. What remained was something more powerful, detachment. Not the cold kind that isolates, but the kind that finally allows you to breathe on your own. One afternoon, I sat on the balcony with a mug of green tea, watching the rain streak softly against the glass railing. My phone rang. I recognized the number before I picked up, my mom. I waited until the 3rd ring before answering. "Lou," she said, cautiously. "I know you're busy, but I hope you can spare a few minutes." I leaned back in my chair and watched a squirrel dart across the power line. "I'm listening." There was a pause, the kind where you can almost hear someone choosing their words like glassware, careful not to drop them. "I've been thinking about everything," she said finally. "About how your father and I treated you. About that day we left without you. I just want to say, I'm sorry. I didn't speak. Not right away." Her words felt real, but I'd spent a lifetime learning that sincerity wasn't in what people said, it was in what they did after they said it. "I was wrong to make that decision," she continued. "Wrong to assume you'd understand. That you'd forgive us, like you always do. I didn't ask how you felt, and I didn't respect your voice." I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of those sentences. They weren't perfect. They didn't undo what had happened. But they were a start. "Thank you for saying that," I said quietly. She exhaled, almost like she'd been holding her breath for days. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, she said. But I want you to know I truly want to change. I don't want to lose you. That phrase, lose you, once would have undone me. But now, it landed gently, without force or fear. Mom, I said, choosing my tone with care, an apology is a beginning. But it's not a reset button. It doesn't fix what's been cracked overnight. I understand, she said. At least, I'm trying to. Then don't try for me, I replied. Try for yourself. I don't want our relationship built on guilt. I want it built on real respect. Silence again. Then, softly, where do we begin? I thought for a moment. You can start by asking if I'm free next week instead of assuming I'll always make time. She let out a laugh, small, awkward, but sincere. Okay. Lou, are you free next week? I'd like to have lunch. Just the two of us. No, April. A smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. Thursday. 1 p.m. same place as always. I'll be there, she said. When we hung up, I didn't feel the usual rush of relief or joy. I didn't cry or feel vindicated. I just felt steady, like I had placed the first stone in building a bridge, but this time with my own hands and blueprint. The following month, I signed up for an evening photography class at the Capitol Hill Art Center. It was something I'd postponed for years, always because someone else needed something more urgently. Now, I was the priority. On the first day of class, I pulled out an old DSLR I'd bought 5 years ago and barely used. The instructor was a woman in her 50s with a gravelly voice, salt and pepper hair pulled into a bun, and eyes that genuinely listened. She said very little during introductions, just enough to make us feel safe, but not directed. I liked her immediately. I didn't talk much that first session. But I observed. I photographed. I started seeing light and shadow the way I had started seeing people, less about what was obvious, more about what was hidden in the folds. Saturday morning, I laced up my sneakers and hiked the Rattlesnake Ledge Trail just outside the city. The air was cool, piney. As I climbed, I looked back at the skyline, Seattle blurred by mist and distance. I didn't feel far away from my life. I felt finally present in it. At the top, I sat on a flat boulder and watched the sun slice through the clouds. My journal was in my backpack. I pulled it out and wrote. I am not a replacement. I am not second best. I am not a backup plan. I am the original architect of my life. And I get to decide who gets a key. That evening, I returned home, warmed up leftover lasagna, and curled on my new sofa. The old one, an unwanted gift from my mother last Christmas, had been donated to the local community center the week I returned from Portugal. I'd replaced it with an olive green one I'd always wanted but had avoided because April once said it felt cold. It didn't feel cold at all. It felt like me. Later that night, I sat at my desk and reopened my travel folder. The spreadsheet was still there. So was the map I'd printed before the trip. I pulled it out, smoothed the creases, and smiled. I took a red pen and circled a small coastal town in southern Italy. Not for anyone else. Not even for symbolism. Just for me. Some mornings still felt like muscle memory. I'd wake early, mentally running through everyone else's needs. Did Mom have that dentist appointment today? Did April's car insurance get sorted? Should I check on Dad's prescriptions? Then I'd remember. I didn't have to. I was Lou Anderson, not the emotional janitor for my family. And every new day was a chance to remind myself that peace wasn't selfish. It was survival. 1 month had passed since my trip to Portugal. My lunch with Mom had come and gone, tense, quiet, but honest. She showed up on time, didn't mention April once, and actually listened. No guilt. No backhanded compliments. Just conversation. It wasn't perfect, but it was a shift. I didn't rush to forgive her. I also didn't shut her out. I left the door slightly ajar, the way you might with someone who used to barge in without knocking. The photography class became my sanctuary. Every Tuesday and Thursday night, I slipped into that softly lit room with strangers who didn't know about my family, or the trip, or the years of quiet sacrifice. All they knew was that I loved contrast, especially in portraits, and that I shot with intent. One Thursday, our instructor, her name was Yvonne, looked at a black and white photo I'd taken of a bus stop at dusk. An elderly man was seated under the shelter, shadowed by falling rain. She tilted her head, thoughtful. "You see pain, but you don't exploit it," she said. That sentence stayed with me all week. Maybe because it was the first time someone had seen me through something I made, not something I gave. Saturday morning, I walked to the corner cafe with my journal in one hand and a worn paperback in the other. I sat at my usual window seat, sipping a warm chai, flipping pages, jotting thoughts. Across from me, a mother scolded her daughter sharply for dropping a croissant. The girl's lip trembled. I watched quietly, not judging, just noticing. It used to be me, absorbing every harsh word without protest. That evening, while making lentil soup, my phone lit up. April. Text message. "So are you going to ignore me forever? Or have you gotten all this out of your system?" I stared at the screen. A year ago, I would have been hurt. 6 months ago, I would have drafted a carefully worded response. But now? I simply deleted the message. She wasn't reaching out to repair anything. She wanted to be right. She wanted to twist the narrative that I was the unreasonable one, the drama queen, the ungrateful sister. But I knew better now. And I wasn't in the business of defending myself to people who treated my boundaries like inconveniences. Later that week, I had dinner with my friend Mia. "Over mushroom risotto and wine?" she asked. "So, are you planning another trip?" I smiled into my glass. Maybe. I was looking at Kyoto or southern Italy. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere that doesn't know my history. Mia grinned. "Solo again?" "Absolutely." When I got home that night, I pulled out the folded map from my desk drawer. The same one I'd circled months ago. I took out a different pen, blue this time, and made a note beside a town called Atrani, spring. The next morning, I answered a call from Dad. His voice was tired, but not manipulative. Just weathered. "Lou," he said. "I know it's late to say this, but I'm proud of you." I should have said that more. I didn't respond right away. I always assumed you were fine. That you didn't need the same things April did. That you'd understand. But that wasn't fair. "No, it wasn't," I said. "But I appreciate you saying that." "I've been thinking," he continued, "maybe it's time I stop being so passive. I let your mother make the call about the trip. I knew it was wrong. I just didn't want the argument." "Then you let me carry the consequences," I said quietly. "I know. And I hate that." We didn't talk long. But the weight between us shifted slightly. Not gone, but no longer pressing against my chest. And it reminded me that change isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's a soft apology, offered too late, but still worth hearing. 2 days later, I received an email from my photography instructor. Subject: Feature Opportunity, Solo Showcase. Yvonne was curating a student showcase for the local art center. She wanted to include 2 of my photos, the bus stop one, and a new piece I'd submitted, a shot of my own balcony, lit by sunset, lavender pots in the foreground. "Your work says what most people are too afraid to admit," she wrote. I sat back, stunned. For years, I had built things for others. Birthday parties, resumes, cover letters, surprise vacations. I had created joy I never got to keep. Now, for the first time, I had created something for me, and someone else saw it. The showcase would be in late April. The same week I'd once planned to be in Rome. Maybe I'd travel after that. Maybe not. Either way, I was no longer chasing love or fairness. I was building meaning. One lens click at a time. The night of the photography showcase, the gallery was lit with soft golden lights and murmuring voices. Rows of framed prints lined the walls, portraits, landscapes, black and white stills. My two photos were displayed side by side, labeled simply, Lou A. People paused in front of them, whispering thoughtfully. A couple pointed to the bus stop photo and nodded with solemn expressions. Another woman took a picture of my balcony shot, smiling softly to herself. I stood a few feet away, not announcing who I was. I didn't need the attention. I just needed to witness it. People were seeing a piece of me, quietly, respectfully, without trying to take anything. Yvonne approached, a flute of sparkling cider in hand. You look like someone who just realized they matter. I turned to her, surprised. Is it that obvious? She grinned. Only to someone who's been there. That night, I walked home instead of driving. Seattle's streets were glistening from a light drizzle, reflecting the world back in gold and gray. I clutched my coat tighter and let myself feel it all, pride, grief, peace. Not everything had healed, but something fundamental had shifted inside me. I wasn't waiting anymore. The following week, I booked a ticket to Italy, a tranny, just like I'd written on the map. It would be a quiet trip. No tours, no itineraries, just me, my camera, and an unfamiliar place. A town small enough to get lost in, and safe enough to rediscover myself in. A few days before my flight, I got an unexpected visitor. It was April. I opened the door to find her standing there, arms crossed, eyes narrowed like a loaded weapon. Her suitcase sat by her feet, scuffed and smaller than the one she had taken to Europe. Can I come in? She asked curtly. I stared at her for a long moment, then stepped aside. She entered cautiously, her gaze scanning my space like it had never been hers to begin with. She didn't sit. She just stood in the center of the room like someone waiting to be accused. I know you're still mad, she began. I came because... I don't know. Maybe to explain. I folded my arms, leaning against the kitchen counter. Explain or justify? She flinched. I didn't mean to hijack your trip. You didn't hijack it, I said. You were handed it. Her mouth opened, then closed again. No defense this time. I was going through a lot, she muttered. Mom said I needed it more. And you didn't question that? Even once? April exhaled sharply. Look, I'm not you, Lou. I don't have your stability, your job, your discipline. You're always so together. And because of that, you thought I could afford to be forgotten? Her jaw tightened. She looked down. I didn't think about it that way, she admitted. I was selfish. That word, selfish, felt strange coming from her mouth. Like a puzzle piece that had always refused to fit, suddenly finding its place. I didn't come to fix things, she said quickly. I guess I didn't want to leave things where we left them. Do you regret going? I asked. She hesitated. Not at first. But after everything unraveled, yeah. It was awful. No one knew where anything was. The hotels were a mess. We kept getting turned away. Mom was a wreck. Dad shut down. And for once, no one had a backup plan. Because you weren't there. That quiet acknowledgement made me pause. I didn't sabotage you, I said. I just took my name off something that was mine. I know. She looked around the apartment again, her voice smaller now. It's nice here. Peaceful. It wasn't always. Silence lingered between us. Then she asked, Are you really going to Italy again? Alone? I nodded. She tilted her head, almost smiling. I don't get it. Doesn't that feel sad? No, I said calmly. It feels free. She sat down finally, sinking into the new green sofa. The one she once said looked cold. Now, she ran her hand over it like it was unfamiliar. I think I thought you'd always be there, she said. That no matter what I did, you'd still drive us, pay the bill, keep the peace. You always did. Until I didn't, I said. April looked up. Can I ask something? Sure. Is this the end? Of us? I walked over and sat across from her. I don't know. That depends. On what? On whether you show up as my sister, or as someone who just wants what I can give. That answer sat between us like a line drawn in chalk. She nodded slowly. When she left, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I just felt whole. The morning of my flight, I didn't rush. I didn't pack for anyone else. I didn't worry about who'd be calling or what chaos I'd be returning to. At the airport, I carried a small journal, a camera, and one soft leather suitcase. The man at the gate smiled at me and said, "Solo trip?" I smiled back. Not really. I've got myself. He laughed. Best company you can ask for. I boarded that flight knowing I wouldn't come back as the same version of Lou they once tried to sideline. I was already someone new. The air in a tranny was different. It smelled like the sea, but not the briny slap of a harbor city, more like salt softened by lemon trees, carried on a breeze that made everything feel lighter. It was a village of winding alleys and pastel houses stacked on cliffs like secrets whispered to the sun. There were no crowds, no booming nightlife, no tourist traps. Just the slow rhythm of a place untouched by urgency. I checked into a small guest house run by a widow named Signora Emilia, whose voice was as raspy as her espresso was strong. My room overlooked the ocean. No TV, no room service, just silence and the sound of waves reaching for the rocks below. It was perfect. Each morning, I woke early and walked barefoot across the cool tile floor to open the shutters. Light flooded in, golden, honest, unfiltered. I didn't check my phone. I didn't think about April, or my parents, or what they might be doing back in Washington. For once, I wasn't living in reaction to someone else's chaos. I was simply living. One afternoon, I hiked a narrow path up the cliffs and stumbled upon a small abandoned chapel. The doors were sealed, but the stone steps were warm and inviting, so I sat. I took out my camera and snapped a photo of the valley below, fields of olive trees, terracotta roofs, and the sea stretching out like freedom itself. In that moment, I didn't feel like a daughter who'd been replaced. I felt like a woman who had reclaimed herself. Later that evening, I wrote in my journal. This is what healing looks like, not a grand revelation, not a dramatic apology. Just a quiet day where I didn't shrink to make someone else feel bigger. A moment where I didn't ache for permission. A sunset I watched for no one but myself. 2 days before my return flight, I sat at a small cafe overlooking the beach. I sipped limoncello and let the sun press gently against my skin. I wasn't ready to go back, but I wasn't afraid anymore either. My phone buzzed for the first time in days. A message from Mom. Just wanted you to know I'm thinking of you. No pressure to respond. I hope the trip is beautiful. There was no guilt in the text. No request. No manipulation. And that, more than anything, told me she might finally be learning. I didn't reply immediately. I let the message sit, not ignored but not rushed. Because I had learned something too. My forgiveness wasn't a tap to be turned on and off. It was a garden. It needed space. Time. Light. The kind I was only now learning to give myself. When I landed back in Seattle, there was no one waiting at the gate, and for once, that felt like a gift. I hailed a cab, watched the familiar skyline roll past, and felt no pangs. No old ache. Just clarity. At home, I unpacked slowly. Washed my clothes. Refilled my fridge. Watered the lavender on the balcony. Then I sat by the window and opened the journal. Tucked inside was a note I'd written to myself on the second day in a tranny. I had forgotten about it. In smudged ink, it read, "Lou, if they never say sorry, will you still be okay?" Yes. Because you've finally said sorry to yourself. And meant it. A few weeks passed. Mom started calling once a week, brief, light conversations. Sometimes we talked about food. Sometimes the weather. Sometimes nothing in particular. But she never mentioned April. She never pushed. She asked questions and waited for answers. That was new. Dad sent me a photo one afternoon, a coffee table he'd refinished himself, captioned, "Trying to do more. Build more." I didn't cry. But I smiled. Quietly. Respectfully. And April? She stayed silent. I didn't chase her. I didn't need her acknowledgement anymore. I wasn't keeping score. I was just done handing out grace to people who hadn't earned it. On a rainy Wednesday, I dropped off 2 of my framed photographs, one from Lisbon, one from a tranny, at a local gallery that had invited me to submit work for their spring exhibit. The clerk asked if I had a preferred title for the set. I thought for a moment, then said, "Call it, Reclaimed." The exhibit opened in April. Strangers came. Some lingered in front of my photos for minutes at a time. Some asked about the places, the stories behind them. I told them the truth, but not all of it. Because the most important story wasn't in the image. It was in the absence. The absence of apology. The absence of need. The absence of the old me. One night after the exhibit, I sat alone at my favorite cafe with a glass of wine and my journal. A young woman 2 tables over was crying silently into her coffee. Her phone sat face down beside her, buzzing with unanswered calls. I watched her for a moment. Then I scribbled something on a napkin, stood up, and gently placed it on her table before walking out into the night. She didn't look up, but I hoped she read it. The note said, "You are not hard to love. Some people just don't know how to do it right. Don't shrink for them. Grow for you." Because I knew what that growth felt like now. And I wasn't going back. Lou's story is a reminder that sometimes the deepest revenge is peace. Not the kind that comes after a battle, but the kind that comes when you choose yourself unapologetically and never hand your worth to someone else again. Thank you for watching Revenge Echoes. If Lou's journey spoke to something inside you, something you've never said out loud, then maybe this was your story too. Subscribe for more true feeling stories. Share your thoughts in the comments. And remember, boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges you build from self-respect. Cross them only when you're ready.